Welcome to another episode of History Now the Future, the show where we take a sharp look at some of the most pressing issues of today, using history as our guide and the future as our destination. My name is Cory Bradford, and Donald Trump has promised to put the smack down on a lot of things, from the Department of Education, to immigration, to even democracy in general. But now he's promising to put the smack down on some of our biggest trading partners in the form of sweeping new tariffs. And no, tariff is not the name of an adult film star from the 1990s, but rather it is a tax imposed on imports. Donald Trump claims he wants to implement a 25% across-the-board tariff on all products being imported from both Mexico and Canada, two of our biggest trading partners. He also wants to put additional tariffs on all products coming in from China, the place where he stole his wall idea from. Now, a 25% tariff is pretty high when applied to any particular product or industry, which is how we normally use tariffs. But an across-the-board tariff of that amount would be disastrous for the American economy because it would raise the price of literally everything. Let's clear up a few things about tariffs. You see, the other country doesn't pay the tariff. The American company importing the foreign good pays the tariff. That money goes directly to the government, and the company almost always passes that increased cost to the consumer, i.e. you. So tariffs increase the price of foreign goods. That must mean that tariffs make American-made products cheaper, right? Wrong. Here's an example. Let's say you want to buy your kid a bike for Christmas. You go to the store and there's two options. A bike made in Mexico that costs like $40 and a bike made in the United States that costs $60 because it's more expensive to produce that bike in the United States. There really isn't any difference in the two bikes. You could argue that the American bike has a higher quality to it, but you just want the cheapest bike that's going to be good for your kid. So normally you would buy the bike made in Mexico because it's $20 cheaper. Now, President Trump comes along and puts a 25% tariff on all products being imported from Mexico. That bike from Mexico that cost $40 now costs $75, give or take. The American bike still costs $60. So now you'd rather buy the American-made bike because it's now cheaper than that Mexican bike. But you have to remember the American bike didn't go down in price. It's the same price it was before the tariff. It just seems cheaper now by comparison to the Mexican bike. And you're still paying more money because originally there was a $40 option for that bike that no longer exists. In that scenario, nothing got any cheaper. Tariffs generally always make things more expensive. Now, who are tariffs good for? Well, other than making the government money, they are somewhat good for American businesses that are trying to compete with foreign markets and can do so more freely if their international competition is hindered by higher prices. However, if those American companies export some of their products to some of the same countries that we impose these new tariffs on, well, now they have to worry about retaliation, which is exactly what happened during the Smoot-Hawley tariff of 1930. Countries we impose tariffs on can impose tariffs back on us, making American products more expensive in those countries. American businesses could see their exports decrease. That would lead to a decrease in their profits, and that could lead to layoffs or lead to those companies increasing their prices here in the United States to make up for their losses in other countries. Now, if you're okay with paying more money for a product just because it was made in the United States, I think that's great. That's a great sacrifice you're making for the American economy. But if you're the same person who's been complaining about the high prices for the last 4 years, and now you're comfortable with prices getting even higher just because Trump said it was a good thing, well, if that's the case, then I have like 5 fucking bridges in New Jersey to sell you, and they're at a great price. They lead to the moon. This past Saturday night, Trump's tariff plan took an even more psychotic turn as Trump decided to threaten the BRICS nations. Now, BRICS, spelled B-R-I-C-S, is a proposed plan by the countries of Brazil, China, Russia, India, and South Africa to create their own currency that will more than likely undermine the US dollar and its dominance in the international monetary system. Trump is now threatening all of those countries with 100% tariffs if they go through with their currency plan. If that were to get implemented, an iPhone made in China would cost nearly $2,000 in the US, meaning you're all going back to green text messages. But I guess you wouldn't see them as green. Obviously, Trump is doing what he does best here, exaggerating and bullshitting his way through the day. I don't think he's going to implement tariffs that high on anyone. He's probably not even going to implement tariffs on Mexico and Canada at 25%. Trump is bluffing. He's threatening these countries with tariffs in order to get them to do what he wants. And more importantly, he's creating a crisis, and then he's going to avoid that crisis by not doing the disastrous thing he said he was going to do. The crisis gets averted. The tariffs don't get implemented, and the prices don't go up. Trump supporters will say, see, prices didn't go up. Liberals were wrong. Yeah, no shit they didn't go up. That's because Trump didn't do the horrible economic policy that he said he was going to do. This is Trump's MO. He lights a fire and then puts it out himself, and then tries to take credit for stopping the fire that he lit. Bro has completely misunderstood Smokey the Bear's entire message. We have a great show for you all today, as usual. We will be talking about President Joe Biden's use of a pardon for his son and the history behind presidential pardons. We'll also be taking a look at some very important developments in international news. But first things first, it's time for Trending Down. Welcome to Trending Down, a segment where we take a look at some of the more trivial topics floating around the internet in the past week. And last week was Thanksgiving. And as we start the holiday season, there's been a lot of discussion surrounding how to deal with family members who have toxic political views during the holidays, and specifically family members who express their political views in very toxic manners. After the outcome of this year's election, a lot of progressives and left-leaning individuals basically decided that they had had enough and that they were going to distance themselves from their Trump-supporting family members. And some people took offense to this idea. Bill Maher, who is increasingly turning into angry boomer who falls for AI pictures on Facebook guy, did a whole segment on his show where he compared Trump supporters to Rosa Parks, claiming that not wanting to be around someone who has different politics from you is like not wanting to sit next to someone on the bus. And he showed a photograph of Rosa Parks during this segment. Bill. I used to be a fan. But what in the actual living fuck are you doing? The idea that the targets of bigotry should be cordial to the bigots who despise them is the most out-of-pocket thing you've said since you referred to yourself as a house nigga on national television. Nigga, please. The reality is, everyone is entitled to protect their peace of mind and their own sanity. And if they feel like they have to cut off certain toxic family members in order to do that, then so be it. And I'm trying to figure out why conservatives are so angry that liberals want nothing to do with them anymore. I mean, you constantly mock liberals on social media. You don't agree with them on anything. You don't respect them. You think they're a bunch of snowflakes and crybabies. You express nothing but disdain and vitriol against their very existence. And now you're upset about them leaving? You're like an abusive husband who beats on his wife for not cooking the chicken right and then beats on her even more when she tries to take the kids and leave. And then it dawned on me. I realized why many, not all, but many Trump supporters are so upset that their liberal family members want nothing to do with them anymore. It's because a lot of these individuals literally thrive on pissing liberals off. It's like the only joy they have left in life these days. I wholeheartedly believe that a ton of Trump supporters don't actually believe that Donald is the only person that can save America, or that he's anywhere near as great as he claims to be. I think they support him because they understand how badly that support angers the left. Owning the libs and bottling up liberal tears is the sole objective of the average far-right conservative these days. And now that progressives are starting to deny them that right by simply blocking these conservatives from their lives, the right-wing trolls are losing one of their greatest pastimes, and many of them have nothing to replace it with. I mean, really think about it. A lot of these trolls are men. They're either single or divorced. They don't have a lot of friends in real life, only friends in their conservative troll circles on places like Twitter X. But that's not real. A lot of them spend all day online trolling because it gives them some sort of satisfaction. Deep down, these individuals know that Donald Trump becoming president again isn't going to change the humdrum nature of their personal lives. Even if he cuts taxes, so what? You got $20 in your pocket instead of 10 after paying all your bills. Congratulations. Go celebrate at Sonic. It doesn't really matter. A second Trump administration only brings joy to these people if they can shove that fucking administration and all of its ills into the faces of the people that they hate and disagree with the most. Without that, the whole thing is meaningless. Now, some of you watching this video right now may fit that description, and you may disagree strongly with what I'm saying. Hell, you're probably leaving disparaging comments on this very video. And guess what? I'm not gonna see it because I don't read comments. I don't read them here or on TikTok or even on Instagram because I learned a long time ago that the only way to defeat a troll is to completely and utterly ignore them because that's all they really want. Attention. You see, you far-right trolls need these liberals. You need them to get upset at your post. You need them to go back and forth with you on Facebook because otherwise, what the hell would you do with your day? The bully at school is a bully because his home life usually sucks. Hurt people fucking hurt people. But when the kid they're bullying is out for the day, the bully is usually quiet because they have no purpose. I say, give the bullies in your life no purpose. President Joe Biden has just issued a full and unconditional pardon to his son, Hunter Biden, who had recently been convicted on tax evasion and gun charges. Biden had previously promised that he wasn't going to use his powers as president to intervene in Hunter Biden's case. But of course, that wasn't the case. Joe Biden claims that one of the main reasons he decided to pardon his son was because he felt like the case against his son was political in nature. Biden also worried that Donald Trump would use his powers as president to investigate Hunter Biden even further. And Trump had expressed a desire to do this. Despite that threat, many are seeing this as a controversial move, mainly because Joe Biden said that he wouldn't issue his son such a pardon. But it's not the first time in American history that a presidential pardon has caused controversy. So what exactly is a pardon? Well, a pardon basically protects a criminal from serving jail time. It can be issued to a person either facing a federal conviction for a specific crime or someone who has already been convicted by the federal government. If already convicted, their conviction is still on the books. But if they're pardoned, they just don't have to serve any legal punishments for their crimes. The power of a U.S. president to issue pardons is guaranteed to them by the United States Constitution. However, under constitutional rules, a president cannot issue pardons in cases dealing with impeachment, although that's never been fully tested by judicial review in the U.S. Supreme Court. Beyond that, there really aren't a lot of rules regarding pardons. They can only apply to federal crimes, not state or local crimes. If someone gets convicted by the state, technically they would have to receive a state pardon, which comes from the governor of that state. And sometimes it comes from a pardon board within a state. Pardon power hasn't been tested a ton in the Supreme Court, except for a few times. For example, the Supreme Court has ruled that a person doesn't necessarily have to accept a presidential pardon, and that a pardon must be introduced in official court proceedings in order to be valid. And the Supreme Court has also not ruled on whether or not a president can pardon themselves. Both Presidents Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton had lawyers considering this option. Pardons have been controversial since the very beginning of the United States. George Washington issued his first federal pardons to leaders of the Whiskey Rebellion on his final day in office. This actually set the precedent of issuing pardons right before you leave office, so you don't have to really deal with the political consequences of them. Andrew Jackson issued many controversial pardons, including one to a man named George Wilson, who apparently robbed the U.S. mail. However, Wilson refused Jackson's pardon, even though he was originally sentenced to the death penalty for this crime. Andrew Johnson issued pardons for thousands of former Confederate officers and military personnel, which once again proves why Andrew Johnson was one of the absolute worst presidents in U.S. history. Although, to be fair, Abraham Lincoln also issued some limited pardons of ex-Confederates, but only if they took loyalty oaths to the United States. And of course, President Gerald Ford issued one of the most controversial pardons of all time when he gave an unconditional pardon to former President Richard Nixon for any charges relating to the Watergate scandal. And Nixon wasn't even facing any charges at the time. This was a preemptive pardon. And this ruined Gerald Ford's approval ratings as he did this early in his presidency. And this pardon also probably cost Ford a chance at getting elected to a full term in 1976. But Joe Biden is not the first person to issue a pardon for a family member. President Bill Clinton pardoned his own half-brother Roger Clinton for a 1985 drug conviction. Roger Clinton was also associated with the Gambino crime family, but we're not even going to go there. And Donald Trump also used his pardon power for his distant family members. Donald Trump issued a pardon to Charles Kushner, who is his son-in-law Jared Kushner's father. Ultimately, Joe Biden will catch a lot of flack for giving a pardon to his son. But this simply isn't an unprecedented thing to do. Until the Supreme Court, or possibly a constitutional amendment, changes the scope of presidential pardons, it will remain one of those things that presidents can pretty much do with no limitations whatsoever. Seriously, somebody should fucking change that. Now it's time for some international news. A ceasefire agreement was signed by Israel, Lebanon, and several other countries, including the United States, back on November 27th. This was a huge development that sought to bring an official end to fighting between Israel and Hezbollah, who had been fighting since October of last year. And yesterday, Hezbollah has already broken that ceasefire. According to the Israel military, Hezbollah fired into a disputed border zone, making it the first reported attack since the ceasefire began. Although there were no casualties in this attack, world leaders are already worried that the ceasefire is unraveling just 5 days after it went into effect. We haven't heard much about the Syrian civil war recently, but a Syrian rebel group known as HTS shocked the world this past week when it was reported that they seized control of Aleppo, the second largest city in Syria, a city that Gary Johnson is not familiar with. And they seized this city with very little opposition from Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government forces. The HTS group is now pushing further south, heading towards Syria's capital, Damascus, as a new deadly wave in the nearly 14-year-old civil war there threatens to become a major foreign policy issue for the incoming Trump administration. I want to thank you all for watching another episode of History Now the Future. You know I really appreciate all the support this Thursday. On our interview episode, we will be talking to Jamal Cannon, who runs a nonprofit group in Chicago, Illinois, and also has some very interesting opinions about parenting. We're going to be talking to him on Thursday. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the page so you never miss a video. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you all next time.